Wham! Talk 1600. You're catching the drift. Conservative talk. Intelligent conversations on local, state, and national issues with Gary Wellings, chief editor of the Current newspaper and Current Online. Join in the conversation at 734-822-1600. And now, your host, Gary Wellings.
And good Saturday afternoon. Thanks for tuning in to Catch Our Drift. Joining me in studio, Ipsy Ed Bonderenka.
It is a good Saturday afternoon. It's a heat wave.
It's a heat wave,
30s.
Yeah. It was 43 in the parking lot when I came in.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. So just great. Well, thanks for tuning in and joining us. What we do on The Drift every Saturday is go over the news we put on thedailydrift.com. It's the
news you need to know.
There you go. Yes. And if you missed this show live, you can catch it Saturday and Sunday evenings on Talk Radio, americatalkradio.us. That's Saturday and Sunday evenings. It's also on Spreaker, SoundCloud, YouTube, and always archived at thedailydrift.com. So you can catch up all the shows we've done since the very beginning there. So it's pretty awesome.
A lot of wisdom.
We're getting down to 300 shows, I think. Pretty close here.
It's a lot of foolishness, too. But that's a lot.
That's a lot of foolishness. Yeah. 300 shows of foolishness, actually. But well, despite all the big news that's going on, we've got some great guests today. We've got Michigan Senate candidate Sandy Pensler on the line. He's going to be joining us shortly here. And then we've got Congressman Tim Walberg joining us at the bottom of the hour to give us some updates fresh out of Washington because he's stuck there. And he contacted me earlier and said, hey, you want to give you some updates? I'm like, that's perfect. So
he wants to tell us what was in the memo, right?
We can ask about it. Yeah. That's all we can do, right? But let's take care of a little business. Bork Jennings Funeral Homes. Folks, don't wait until it's too late. Make your arrangements for passing of loved ones or yourself ahead of time by contacting Bork Jennings Funeral Homes. There's more to the end of life than just a casket, right? Mm-hmm. There's plans that need to be made. There are things that have to be done. And Bork Jennings Funeral looks at the big picture, right? You can go to Bork, B-O-R-E-K, Jennings, Jennings.com, BorkJennings.com, or you can call 810-231-0200. It's a very serious matter. Hate to bring that up, but you know what? In the end, none of us get out alive, right? Yep. And so think ahead, not just for your sake, but for your family and your loved ones, because they shouldn't have to be worrying about details when they're grieving over you. So
and even if you don't plan to buy, just go in and get familiar with the process.
Yeah, get the information, prep yourself a little bit, and they're great people. The Bork Jennings family, funeral homes they've got funeral homes in Hamburg, Howell, Manchester, and Brooklyn, Michigan. So a great group of people, very dedicated to helping your family get through the trying issue. Yep. Okay, so we're going to bring on Sandy Pensler, who's running for Michigan's U.S. Senate seat as a Republican. Sandy, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Glad you were finally able to get in and join us. So we want to get a little bit about you, and then we'll quiz you a little bit and get you some of the information and where you're standing on certain issues. Because goodness knows, Sandy, there's a whole lot of issues to deal with right now. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how, as a very successful businessman and educator, you've gotten to be where you are today?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. But before I start, I heard you're having Tim come on after me, and I just want to give a big shout out to the Michigan Republican delegation for working hard, getting the tax bill passed with no help from the Democratic delegation, and putting their heads out on the line before trying to repeal Obamacare. So big hats off to Tim.
Absolutely.
So let me tell your audience a little bit about me, and then we can get into policy and our value issues. My background: grew up in Michigan, grew up in Detroit, 7 Mile and Livernois, for those that know where that is. Went off to school, came back a variety of times, bought a company here, moved my family back. My parents were here. They're gone now. My grandparents also were here. My background really, as a training, chemical engineer, and then a master's in economics, and then law degree. But really, my business training was done primarily, I think, in New York, where I was at a major investment bank, variety of them leading turnarounds. So turnarounds for companies like Chrysler, Time Warner, worked with the board at Norfolk Southern, GE, and a whole host of companies, boards, and chairmen.
Yeah, and let's stop there for a second, Sandy, because
Sure.
people need to understand how important that is. You are not just another politician. You are a successful businessman, much like Donald J. Trump. You're bringing that focus of pro-business because, you know what, in the end, America's business is business. And if you want to have people making more money, you have to have a pro-business mentality. And that's what you're bringing to the table, just like Donald Trump brought to the table.
No, I couldn't agree more, and I think I have another added little twist. I also taught economics for a while, both at Yale and Harvard. And so I understand how to create incentives, what drives the economy. And when I hear some of the liberal economists spewing what I can't characterize really other ways than BS, I can cut through it and understand what the difference between wheat and chaff. But absolutely bringing those principles, market principles, dynamics of competition, to the policy discussion, just like President Trump has done, is, I think, a feature I bring that's pretty rare in politics. That especially when coupled with my economics backgrounds. I know I've done it before. I've created my own company. I've built things from scratch. I didn't inherit things from my parents other than great values.
Well, Sandy,
I didn't go into their companies. I built things from scratch. I've grown them, and I've turned around very large companies and smaller companies that I've bought. And I think I can bring those skill sets to Washington and really bring them to bear to help Michiganders and to continue to grow the economy that's begun to really take off with Trump as president, but still has a long ways to go.
Sandy, I appreciate one thing about you. You have disproved that old adage that those who can't do, teach. As it seems that you've done both. And it looks like you have the ability to explain to other people what you've done. So it's nice to see the contributions you've made to the Michigan economy, and as a successful businessman. What would you do as a state senator? As a senator for the state to promote the economy in Michigan?
Let me go through sort of a litany of things, and when they've started to get a little too long, just cut me off. Look, I think what we saw in the tax bill was one of the first great steps we have for growing jobs. Debbie is sort of a counterpoise to everything that I bring. I understand the economy and have taught at major universities. She's never held a private sector job. I've always been in the private sector. So when it came to lowering taxes, decreasing regulations, and encouraging companies to repatriate funds that were stuck abroad from a broken tax system, she wanted to block it. So I think there's still more to do. I think it was the first step, and it's going to be rocket fuel for the economy, but there's more to do. We've started to turn around this huge, massive ship. I guess that's an understatement of the regulatory nation into one that really encourages entrepreneurship and individual actions. And I think that road that Trump has really directed us on has a long way to go, but he needs help.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're at a historic juncture. We're seeing it almost every day. We're seeing it with the government shutdown. And Michigan has the ability to really change the direction of the country by bringing another Republican senator, especially one that understands business and can lead in the Senate, to bear. So start out with jobs, go to great jobs. You need two things. One, you need trade deals that are fair. I was just talking to one of the division heads of Ford yesterday, and he was talking about how when they set up in China, their joint venture structure has to have 50% plus Chinese ownership. And it's sort of a foregone conclusion that the mobility ideas, the code, is going to get really kind of stolen. I don't know how else to put it, by the Chinese. It's just not a fair deal. When they want to invest here, They can buy a U.S. company.
When
we want to invest there, we got to have a 50% Chinese stakeholder.
I was informed recently,
time and again, and Trump's pointed it out, but there's only so many times that people listen. But we got to work on these deals to make them fair for Americans. And we've got to change our education system so that we don't just reward seniority. The Michigan Education Association endorsed Gretchen the other day. My gosh, it's not about seniority, it's about performance. And the best way to get performance into schools is competition. We live it every day in my companies. When you have competition, you get better or you don't survive. And we got to bring that to the education system. And Trump and DeVos, I think, are doing that with choice. But it's being blocked by career politicians like Debbie Stabenow, who just are backed by these special interest unions. It's not the teachers. The teachers want to do right by the students. They love the incentive pay. But this tradition of rewarding based on seniority and making that the benchmark of how you gauge everyone's crazy. And it hurts our kids. It hurts our country. Let's talk about the Great Lakes. So here's one where Debbie and I agree. Everybody in Michigan, we love the Great Lakes. But boy, do we have different ways of approaching it. She's yelling and screaming about China and the Paris Climate Accord, how terrible it was to back out. Well, really what we backed out of was having the people of Muskegon, Lansing, I guess you guys are in Ann Arbor now, Detroit, shooting our money over to Guangzhou, Beijing, and Mumbai so that they can implement things, and we send them our money to do that. It's crazy. Let's use that money to fix the Great Lakes, build trails up along the Great Lakes all throughout Michigan and other environmental projects. Let's not send it over to China.
Okay.
Well, by the way, when you're negotiating with the president and his budget, if you said no to everything, 50 different times, she's just the resistance, and then something comes up that she really doesn't like the Great Lakes cutting funding. Oh, but that one, I didn't like everything else, but this one I really don't like. Well, you know what? That doesn't work very well. I'll put the Michigan interest first. I'll work with the White House. We'll get things like the F-25 wing that should have gone over to the Selfridge Air Force Base. We'll get things like the missile silo defense that should go over at Fort Custer. But we can't with resistance being what holds Michigan back, being the representatives in Congress. I'll stop and let you ask some more questions because I don't want to go on too
right,
long.
Wow, now that's rare. That's really different right there.
Well, you hit one of them for me. So I know you're not one of the climate change nuts. So that obviously right there puts you in good standing with me. Now, Ed, did you have a question that you wanted to get in?
Well, in general, I wanted to know what is informing you you're a successful businessman. I assume you're doing well. It's not that, this would be, like Tharon says, the best job I ever had. You obviously don't want to be I wouldn't think you'd want to be a career politician. What motivates you for this, to get into this position?
So let me first talk about career politician. I'm 61. I'm too old to be a career politician.
Exactly.
That's not in the cards. So this would be, yes, I've been very successful in my businesses. I've been very fortunate. The country's been wonderful for me. My first and foremost job is my family. I've got a wonderful family. But I look out there and say, you know what, kids, I think you'll probably be okay, but I'm not so sure about my grandkids. I don't have any yet. They're younger, my kids. But China is an imperialistic force. And if you think they're in the backwaters with old production methods, you're just wrong. You're 40 years ago. And if you listen to President Xi's speech, which he made about China 2025, it's an imperialistic force. They have a different view of how to drive their economy. They think it's better. And everything in China goes up through President Xi. That's not how I want my kids, my grandkids, to live.
Yeah.
We live in this wonderful free country with a market system that lets individuals have self-realization of where they want to go, what they want to do.